the BBC World Service. And on our website, you can explore more of our programmes, from documentaries to science. Listen and download at any time by going to bbcworldservice.com. On air, online and on smartphone, this is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
Welcome to Newshour from the BBC World Service. I'm Julian Warwicker. In Ukraine, negotiations to agree evacuation routes have broken down. A Ukrainian MP tells us why, for him, Russia's proposals for humanitarian corridors are unacceptable.
They're saying that let's make corridors to Russian Federation, but then people just don't want to go there. Russian Federation just wants to use them as hostages.
We've a desperate plea from one of hundreds of Indian students currently stuck in Ukraine's northeastern region.
We hear sounds of jets flying. There are killings and firings. They came here just to study, and we just want to go home.
Plus, the information war and the role that social media is playing in allowing troop movements and possible human rights abuses to be documented in Ukraine. That's all after the latest world news.
BBC News, hello, I'm Gareth Barlow. Ukrainian rescue workers say at least 13 people were killed when an airstrike hit an industrial bakery west of Kyiv. More than 30 people are believed to have been in the vicinity of the plant in the town of Arturia. In the nearby town of Irpin, 1,000 people were taken to safety after Ukrainian forces repelled Russian attacks. The BBC's Ola again. Watch the news.
This is a difficult journey every step of the way. Some are coming with their children. Most are coming with a few small things they can carry. They've been under bombardment in Irpin for days, and they're not safe now, even as they try to leave. The shelling has been continuing. For many civilians in the town, the shelling hit home, like Anastasia, whose baby son, Oleg, is just 5 months old. The day before yesterday, a shell hit our house, she tells me. Now we are leaving because it's too dangerous to be in any corner of Irpin.
Negotiations to agree evacuation routes broke down after Russia said it would open humanitarian corridors leading to its own territory or to Belarus. Ukrainians dismiss this as completely immoral. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken urged Russia to let people out of besieged cities and let food and medicine in. Britain, Canada and the Netherlands have announced the formation of an international coalition to provide long-term support for Ukraine. The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson hosted his Canadian and Dutch counterparts, Justin Trudeau and Rutte, in London. They invited other nations to join the new coalition. Mr. Trudeau said that Russia had shown that it was no longer a reliable partner. He announced further sanctions against those closest to the Russian President, Vladimir Putin.
Canada, UK and the Netherlands are close defense partners. We're working together to mobilize the global community to step up to support Ukraine, and we'll continue to defend democracy and the values that underpin it, to continue to make sure that Putin is held accountable.
Meanwhile, for his part, the Dutch Prime Minister said it was essential to dramatically reduce Western reliance on Russian oil and gas. On the diplomatic front, the Turkish Foreign Minister, Mevlut Cavusoglu, said his Russian and Ukrainian counterparts, Sergei Lavrov and Dmitry Kuleba, will meet in Turkey this week.
Both ministers asked me to particularly take part in this meeting as a three-way meeting. Therefore, on Thursday, we'll hold this meeting in Antalya. We hope it'll be a milestone and an important step towards peace and stability.
In Belarus, however, a third round of talks between the Ukrainian and the Russian delegation has broken. You're listening to the World News from the BBC. The head of the United Nations Nuclear Watchdog has expressed hope that Russia and Ukraine will accept his offer for security talks. The agency's Director General said it was absolutely unacceptable that no normal operation took place at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, which was seized by Russian troops last week. In other news, researchers in Britain and Germany say the Amazon rainforest is becoming less resilient. increasing the risk of permanent loss of vegetation. The study shows the resilience to extremes such as drought has declined in more than 3/4 of the rainforest since the turn of the century. Ian Briggs reports.
Researchers say the Amazon could soon reach a tipping point, the crossing of which would trigger a widespread die-off of trees, turning tropical forest into savanna and releasing large amounts of greenhouse gas emissions into the air. And while it's not clear when that critical point might be reached, there would be major repercussions for climate change, biodiversity and local livelihoods. Experts say the study highlights the urgency for policymakers and the public to protect and restore this globally important ecosystem before it's too late.
British scientists say they've identified 16 new genetic variants in COVID DNA. It helps their understanding of why some infected people are predisposed to severe illness and others go symptom-free. Some of the variants relate to blood clotting, immune response and severe inflammation. It hopes the findings could lead to new treatments. Well, the Supreme Court in Namibia has ruled the government discriminated against a gay couple when it denied residency to the Mexican partner of a gay Namibian man. The court ordered the Home Affairs Ministry to reconsider the application of the analogue. The case is seen as a legal test for rights in Namibia. The country grants permanent residency to foreigners married to locals, but same-sex marriages aren't legally recognised and homosexuality is illegal. BBC News.
Hello and welcome to NewsHour from the BBC World Service, coming to you live from London. I'm Julian Warwick. There's been more fighting and more bloodshed in Ukraine today, with shelling of more areas close to the capital, Kiev, and around the southern city of Mariupol. But across the border in Belarus, there have also been more talks. Delegations from Russia and Ukraine met for the third time since the war began, but there was little hope of progress, and it seems little was achieved when the talks broke up. The Ukraine negotiator said they didn't lead to a result that significantly improved the situation. The hope, and it was a distant one, was that secure corridors could be agreed upon, ways for civilians to get out of places where the bombing and the fighting was at its most dangerous. There were 2 ceasefire attempts in Mariupol at the weekend, but neither held. Earlier, President Macron of France accused the Russian President Vladimir Putin of moral and political cynicism after Russia failed to deliver on that commitment to let Ukrainian civilians escape the cities it's bombarding. Russia, though, has accused the Ukrainians of blocking the corridors. Speaking before those talks in Belarus, Moscow's chief negotiator, Vladimir Medinsky, blamed what he called the nationalists.
The Russian side was ready to open these corridors immediately the next day. Naturally, a ceasefire was activated for the duration of the humanitarian corridors. Unfortunately, to date, almost none of them has fully worked. Our side conducted surveillance from drones over each of these corridors. The nationalists prevented civilians from leaving the city.
Well, you'll hear Ukrainian reaction to that in a moment. First, I'm joined by our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, who's in Kiev. Is there any sign of progress at all, Lise, on these humanitarian corridors?
Well, in a moment where every day brings up new reports of atrocities, of destruction, of hardship, any little inching forward has to be seen as progress, even if it falls short of what is needed. There was a statement by the chief Ukrainian negotiator who basically said that they did make some progress on the logistics of these humanitarian corridors, some of the routes, some of the regulations, but he said they still fell short in discussing the broader political situation. So the words used by the advisor to the President's Office of Ukraine said there was small, positive progress.
And I suppose a lack of trust is so much of a problem here.
Complete mistrust. All it takes is for one side to open fire, to blame the other, and then it all goes off again. And I think that's what happened on Saturday. That's what happened on Sunday. Even worse, the ICRC, which is overseeing these evacuations, found out that the roads were mined. And then, of course, as we've been reporting, this bombshell that the routes, 2 or 4 of the 6 routes, went for Russia, which Ukrainians said they simply would not accept. They described it as morally unacceptable, and that a way for Russia to cover up for all of its bombardment. So, it's what a misnomer, humanitarian corridors. It's more like an inhumane tunnel which has kept thousands of people trapped. The stories from Mariupol, on the Sea of Azov, the southern strategic port city, are absolutely breathtaking. That people are drinking from puddles, that bodies are lying in the streets, people have no heating, and I can tell you, it is bitterly cold.
And fighting is still continuing in other parts of the country as well.
Many parts of the country. Russia is taking advantage of its position in Crimea within the peninsula it annexed in 2014, where it has forces used to working with each other. It's making more rapid progress from southern directions, but they're also fighting very close to the capital, Kyiv. I have to say that as night fell, there was a significant amount of explosions, very loud, which seemed to suggest they were using much heavier ordnance closer to the capital. But we also saw a lot of activity with surface-to-air missiles being fired to take the missiles down. An unconfirmed report from a Ukrainian journalist that they shot down 2 Russian warplanes.
Please, thank you. Pleased to say. Well, Alexei Goncharenko is the MP for the city of Odessa and a member of President Zelensky's party. He gave me his response to those proposed humanitarian corridors from the Russians.
We started the conversation about humanitarian corridors, but Russians in reality don't want any humanitarian corridors. They were shooting, for example, yesterday, they were shooting a humanitarian corridor from Irpin, which is a town 20 kilometers here, and 8 civilians were killed there, just in this so-called humanitarian corridor. Now we hear another story that they're saying that let's make corridors to Russian Federation, but then people just don't want to go there, and people understand that the Russian Federation just wants to use them as hostages.
What then, for you, would constitute a serious offer when it comes to humanitarian corridors?
It's clear. Just to stop shooting and to give us possibility to take people from the towns and cities where they are blocked without electricity, where they need medical help, and so on, to safety on Ukrainian territory, like we are ready to do this. That is a real humanitarian corridor which we are insisting on.
And in which particular cities are you talking?
The most difficult situation, humanitarian, is in Kyiv region. These towns around Kyiv, Irpin, Bucha, Makar, and others, and Mariupol, which is a 500,000 population city on Azov Sea. That is the most difficult situation for the moment.
Talks are going on as we speak in Belarus, the third round of talks between yourselves and Russian delegations. Do you have any hope at all that in those talks some kind of agreement on this could happen?
There is always hope, certainly hope, but is it high possibility? I think no, because we are just some very strange demands from Russian Federation. They are saying all the time they want some denazification. And I'm sorry, who is not? We are defending our homes, who is the president Jewish, our Russian Federation, which is shooting at schools, hospitals, maternity houses, kindergartens. So when they're saying we want denazification, it means that we don't want any peace talks.
You talk about Russian demands, various reports emerging from Russia on that at the moment talk of them saying that Ukraine must change its constitution to guarantee that it won't join blocs like NATO or the EU, that Ukraine must recognize Crimea as part of Russia, must recognize the eastern separatist regions as independent. Could you contemplate any of that?
No, it means that they want us to surrender. And we understand then in 1 year there will be another war. They will say, no, we want Kharkiv, Odessa, and then we want Kiev. It's a salami tactic. We will never accept on this.
Can I be clear on what you were saying a moment ago? This phrase denazification, something that President Putin has said of Ukraine, but you were talking about Nazis in the context of Russians being Nazis. What do you mean?
I think Nazis are those who are just breaking all the international rules and those who are committing a crime, like they are now doing, shooting at children, at women. When you see Kiev today, which looks like very much like London in 1940, bombed by Nazis, when our women and children are in metro, in subway, like it was in London in 1940. When you see killed civilians and things like this, we want just to show and to find the words and language for the world to realize what's happening in our country.
Well, Andrei Korshunov is the Director General of the Russian International Affairs Council. I put to him that Ukrainian allegation that the Russian offer on humanitarian corridors was immoral.
I think that what we see right now is both sides accusing each other of immoral positions. The Russians argue that Ukrainians block the flow of civilians out of major metropolitan areas, and by doing that they turn civilians into hostages of the military activities, while Ukrainians argue that Russians are not ready to allow civilians to move in the direction of the territories still controlled by the Ukrainian army. So I think that both sides are not ready to take a more generous approach to humanitarian corridors and to give the civilians the right to choose in what direction they should go.
Well, the onus on this is surely on the Russians. We've had 2 ceasefire attempts already in Mariupol where people are running out of food. They both collapsed at the weekend because the Russians kept firing.
Well, that's the Ukrainian interpretation of the events. I don't want to question it, but if you follow the Russian official news, that you will get an entirely different picture of what has happened. They argued that Ukrainian nationalists did not allow people to leave the city.
Let's deal with the current offer in that case. There is no question, is there, that the Russian offer says you can go along a humanitarian corridor, but it will only take you to either Russia or Belarus. If the only offer you're made to escape the bombing of your town is to go to the country that's doing the bombing, would you go?
You know, I agree with your position. You're preaching to the choir. I think that people of these cities should have a choice where they should go. We should like that the humanitarian corridors should lead into various directions, including directions which are controlled by Ukrainians. I think that would be only natural.
And it makes the offer nonsense, doesn't it? Why would anybody go if they thought they'd end up in Russia or Belarus?
Well, I'm not in a position to judge about the motivations of people who would like to escape, but I think that the perception in the Kremlin that there's some of the people who prefer to go in this direction, like many people in Donbass, are looking to find shelter in Russia.
Is there an onus on Russia to make these offers more credible? The talking is still going on in Belarus involving the various delegations. This is an issue that is on the table. Could the Russians do something that made that offer more credible?
I think that it is clearly not in Russia's interest to inflict more damage on the civilian population. I see no Russian answer that, no logic whatsoever. I think Russia should be the first to try to avoid additional collateral damage, because in the end of the day it will be accused of this damage and losses of civilian lives. So, in my view, the Russian delegation should demonstrate as much flexibility as possible to avoid this collateral damage.
Andrei Korshunov is Director General of the Russian Affairs Council. You're listening to the BBC World Service, and this is Newshour. Coming up, the Russian assault on the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, and its outskirts continues. A graphic photo published on the front page of the New York Times shows the dead bodies of a mother, father, and their 2 children lying next to their luggage and their dog. We hear from the photojournalist who took the image and who witnessed the attack.
They're not going to target them because everyone knows this is a civilian evacuation route. And in fact, when the war started coming in closer and closer, I was photographing and I was sort of furious as I was witnessing my landscape, really incredulous that I could be witnessing what I was witnessing.
That's coming up in about 30 minutes' time. Our headlines: Ukraine says the Russian army is preventing evacuation of the civilian population from other cities by continuing its bombardment. And in other news, security sources in Sudan have raided the offices of an independent committee that was investigating the massacre of more than 100 demonstrators in 2019. This is Julian Warwick with Newshour live from the BBC in London. Well, the United Nations says that the war in Ukraine has led to the largest exodus of refugees in Europe since World War II. More than 1.5 million people have crossed Ukraine's borders. But there are also huge numbers who've been internally displaced. The city of Lviv in western Ukraine has experienced a huge influx of people from elsewhere in the country. And that's meant a massive humanitarian effort within the city, as Newshour's Tim Franks has been finding out.
You know that familiar expression about a hive of activity? I feel as if I've stepped right into the middle of that hive. This is Ukraine's biggest art centre. Well, it was. It's now the centre for a countrywide humanitarian operation. It's a bit like a Hollywood movie about a US presidential campaign. It's furious, crisscrossing movement, people crammed next to each other behind desks, phones cradled between chin and shoulders, submerged by mounds of paper. There are men patrolling with AK-47s. They're very twitchy about what they call infiltration, terrorist attack. Yuri Popovich is helping oversee the whole operation.
In my previous life, I was running a software development company.
And when did that stop?
The first day, or the day after the bombing, I just could not focus on my job, so I decided that I need to do something else. So it's a lot of work, a lot of people, but everyone is working very nicely. We just do what we can do. We cannot do more than that.
Of course, at the moment, Lviv feels like a long way from where all the fighting has been. How concerned are you that that might change?
You know, I'm optimist as a person, but now I think it's a matter of time when we can be also attacked as well. I'm not very sure that we are going to be safe here as well.
But you're going to carry on working as long as you can.
Absolutely. That's, you know, I keep saying that everyone has to fight its own fight. Our fight right now is here, and if we will have to fight different fights, we will fight them as well.
That's Yuri and the massive logistical operation that he's overseeing. This is another large space. The facility near a factory has been repurposed into it's not pejorative, it is really an HQ for hipster Lviv. Entrepreneurial anarchy, they call it there. Photo studios, niche businesses, small theatre space. Now, of course, it's been repurposed again into a place to help the refugees, the vast and growing population of Ukraine's displaced.
Hi, my name is Victoria. I am improviser. I have improv school in Lviv here on this factory. Improvisation is everything I do for life. And when everything got started, we gathered together and decided to make here some space for the safety of refugees, for them to feel themselves brightly that everything is okay, because a lot of them had panic attacks and they are worried because they don't feel the safety. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Where are you going to take us first then?
We are going to children's space. We will start from it and then we will improvise.
It's a place full of life. There are musicians, there's Victoria, as you've probably gathered from the very energetic, upbeat character. She tears through this factories and offices and refugee centre. But even Victoria can't illuminate every single space. Just behind this door, it's a somber picture, a quiet room filled with women and children who have recently fled some of the worst hit places.
My name is Valentina Arturia and I'm from Kharkiv.
From Kharkiv? When did you arrive in Lviv?
The day before yesterday.
Kharkiv has been one of the hardest hit cities in Ukraine. Tell me what the experience was like for you.
It was literally nightmare since day one. I was alone at home with my grandchildren as my daughter and my husband were at work, and when it started we went to the kitchen and saw everything, and that was just terrible and scary. So we spent the whole first night sitting in the subway station, and so many buildings were destroyed. I beg you for one thing, please close the skies. They are bombing citizens, peaceful citizens. They are ruining our city. Please, if I can ask just one thing, I would ask this.
You may have noticed, especially there, Valentina said, Pajalistan, she's thinking Russian, not Ukrainian. That's really common. Someone from the east of Ukraine, Kharkiv, is right up against the border with Russia. Indeed, Valentina's father was Russian. And listen to how she speaks now of Russian people. What this war has already done to harden, to sour feelings.
Now we just hate them. This is a genuine truth, because we have always been friends. This is the family belongs Russian. We have never done any harm to them. We have never done anything ill to them. I just want to continue speaking. I just feel very bad right now.
The voice of Valentina Banderova from Kharkiv, ending that report from my colleague Tim Franks, who's in Lviv, and Tim is live on the programme now. Striking contrast to what we just heard, Tim. I wonder how you assess the mood of the city just now.
The mood is changing here. I think there is a feeling, it's easy for me to say because I've just wafted in a few days ago, but I think there was a feeling that Lviv was pretty distant. It is pretty distant from the fighting. It's hundreds of kilometres away across this vast country that Russian troops and the Russian Air Force are attacking from the north, from the east and from the south. But there is a feeling that the war is getting closer, not just because of the huge influx of internally displaced people, but there is a feeling that the Russians are coming for the whole country, and for that reason I think a lot of people here are beginning to, not to worry, but to stiffen their resolve. This is a very nationalistic part of Ukraine. There is a feeling of people girding themselves, possibly for a fight ahead.
And how much help is coming into Lviv from outside the country?
A lot, and that help is largely humanitarian. There's other sorts of help that is coming in from the Ukrainian government, but it is just on a scale less. You said right at the top in your introduction that the United Nations itself is saying they haven't seen in Europe since the Second World War, and there's a feeling that this is going to get a lot bigger, the humanitarian crisis, that is a crisis of displacement of refugees, and it's going to go on for a very long time. It's going to drain everybody's resources.
Tim, thank you very much. Tim Franks from the western Ukraine city of Lviv. You're listening to Newshour from the BBC World Service.
This is the BBC World Service, where we're looking at human nature.
I'm Bessa, the host of Deeply Human, a guided tour through the wilderness inside your head. An investigation of human instinct, culture, and biology to find out why we do what we do. This week's dances, from rain dances to raves. Why do our bodies react to rhythm?
You will experience that point where you just leave your body. It's like I'm at another location in the room, and then I'm watching myself dance.
Why does music move us?
It moves a little easier and lighter. It's also a little lighter. Dance is both therapy and a way to elevate my spirits.
I'm looking at the neuroscience of music and movement.
The connections in our brain can synchronize their firing to mutual beats. When we move, we tend to connect to the sound, to the vibration.
Deeply Human at bbcworldservice.com/Deeply Human.
Coming up on NewsHour in the next 30 minutes, Western leaders agree to further economic measures to help Ukraine and punish Russia. An Indian student stuck in Ukraine tells me of his desperation to escape the war. And role of social media in the conflict, how troop movements and human rights abuses are being filmed and documented. That's all after the latest news.
BBC News with Gareth Barlow. Ukrainian rescue workers say at least 13 people were killed when an airstrike hit an industrial base in the Kiev, north of the capital. At least 5 people